This is an SOP that didn't get followed. All right. Welcome to Coaching 2024. I am in a particular part of the coaching industry that I think is like particularly interesting right now, like in terms of like some of what my audience sits on and some of my clients that we're going to talk about. But I also have so many colleagues and friends. Like, I want you guys to consider, like, the coaching industry is actually quite gigantic. And one of the analogies I'll be carrying through today is like to say, like, this is happening in the coaching industry would be like saying, like, this is happening like in the housing market, which like we're going to talk about the 2008 housing market. Like, even in that, when like a lot of the nation was facing something certain, there were actually markets that were totally fine, right? So I think that's like, it's really important to understand our brain can sort of just like not paint things with nuance. And I think that's one of the biggest things I'm wanting to carry forward is like to notice how nuanced this conversation is. And we're going to get into sort of the knobs and buttons around some of these things. All right. First, I am so curious for you to get curious and just feel into how has your buying behavior changed in the past 12 months? That doesn't even have to be related to buying coaching. It could just be in general, like, oh, I noticed that I'm wanting to spend a lot more on vacations, or I noticed that I'm shifting, like I used to spend on this and now I'm spending on that. And if you like take a moment to reflect on it, but also if something's coming up for you, you can like drop it in the chat below. Like, it would just be really interesting. I've noticed myself, because I started reflecting on this. I was like, oh, like, how has my buying behavior changed? And like, what's the reason for that? Like, that could be really interesting for you to explore. Oftentimes, if you're seeing something in your own business, it's not always, right? Like, you might have a different sort of purchasing behavior, but it can be super useful to explore your own buying psychology, your own sort of patterns of purchasing behavior, where stuff is moving, where it's shifting, right? Because one of the things that I've noticed for myself is I'm not spending any less as a buyer, but actually where I am spending my money is shifting. And even within coaching, the types of offers that I am most drawn to have shifted from where they were like a couple of years ago. So it's just something for you to like really have top of your mind as you're navigating things in your own business. All right. Okay. Some people, not everyone, but some people have noticed markedly slower sales in 2024. So here's a diagram, right? Is your market facing genuine financial constraints? That's like the first thing that you have to start to look at, and then we'll go through there. So we are not going to go through this whole flow chart because first, we have to actually set some context, right? So by the end of this, I promise that flow chart will be filled out. Like, you'll be able to look at like, oh, I'm noticing this and this, or maybe I'm noticing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? And you'll start to notice like there's different solutions depending on what the root cause of the issue is. But before we get there, we have to understand the context in which our businesses exist. So we're going to flow through that entire flow chart in a little bit. But first, we have to sort of explore like what's happening inside of digital business, what's happening inside of the coaching industry, what's happening inside of these the macroeconomic factors, right? So we're going to cover what all of those things are contextually, because that then feeds into what's happening inside of people's businesses. Why are people seeing big shifts and other people aren't? So, the state of the coaching industry. Shit is weird. And we know it's like circumstantially weird, and it's not just your energy or your limiting beliefs. I think some of that can be. I've noticed some people who've like gone into scaled businesses that have like had stuff go sideways, and then it like totally, it sort of like knocks them out. Like, they rose to power, then they've been knocked really far, and then it sort of perpetuates this cycle, right? But one of the things like that would be useful for you to track is like, you know, that some things, like not just you, when you start to see online marketers changing the messaging to get you to click on things, right? So it's just interesting if you notice, I just started noticing like, oh, that's a shift, right? Where the hook, because if you think about what is an ad, the number one thing, the first sentence they're going to lead with is the thing that's going to grab your attention, right? And so what are they doing? Launching your courses in 2024 sucks. There, I said it. Another one, did this past year kick your business's butt, right? So it's just like, it's just good to know. And not everybody. Like if you're not noticing anything, and also if you're in the beginning of your business, I don't want you to like, I've actually, for most people who are earlier on in their business, I'm noticing they're not seeing any issues, right? So like to not also assume because you're seeing ads about it that it will be your experience. Again, there's nuance. We're going to cover a lot of nuance today. Okay. So while some online coaching businesses have suddenly shut down, folded, like 7-figure businesses like walk away, like big names that we see just like quitting and walking away, noticed like it was so funny actually. I remember when I first started like 5 years ago, I like bought a Hillary Rushford like Instagram course, and then it was like at the end of last year, I was like, holy shit! Oh, just out of nowhere, like she like put everything on a fire sale and then just like walked away from her business, and she was like a fairly well-known name in the space. If anyone, like I know I have a lot of people in my audience from the life coach school, and it's like, wow, like someone who's been running something for, I think like Get Coached has been running for like 8 years, right? To suddenly be like shutting down like a giant arm of the business. Like it's interesting, right? When you see patterns of things, it's interesting to be like, wonder what's going on there? What's that about? But while some people are super affected, there's other coaching businesses that are thriving like bigger and brighter than ever. And so just like for funsies, I just like pulled, this was like inside of my Brand Alchemy Accelerator program. Like this was 2 months ago, someone joined and then they took the energetic thirst traps training. And then they used the training to create some content on TikTok in 24 hours, got 600 applications to her group coaching program, where the most she'd ever gotten was like 15, right? And so it's like, wait, what? Like, so while other people like huge plummets, we're seeing like swings wildly up and very fast in others. Like, interesting, right? What are the patterns? I have other people in my Words Are Wands mastermind. I'm noticing actually like my lower in between, like I would say like 30,000 a year to like 200,000 a year clients, like everything's humming and going better than ever, right? So like, it's just really fascinating for me to track with clients across multiple types of businesses, like what seems to be happening and talking to friends, right? So like, this was literally June 25th. So what was that, like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? I had a client cross $100,000 in her last 12 months, 65,000 last 6 months, right? So sales are like popping off like champagne in many coaching businesses. Another client who's launching her first group program and like already within a couple of days had already signed 2 clients into her mastermind. So like sales are for sure happening. But what the fuck is happening? It's like, wait, what? Like in some parts, it just seems to be like mass chaos. And in others, it's just like this massive pop, pop, pop. It's like New Year's Eve, like sales keep coming in. What seems to be driving that? So there's patterns in who's being impacted and who isn't. And obviously I am not, and I mean, listen, I think we are all God, like God works through all of us. And I am fairly intuitive and psychic, but this is more my rising Capricorn of like my logical brain of what I have tracked from watching the people whose like businesses I am helping with, right? And you might notice once you start to put on the lens of this training, you might start to notice slightly different patterns in your field. But today I want to provide the frameworks and the lenses through which you can be looking at things. And this is what I have noticed. People whose client bases are digital entrepreneurs or coaches, even if they don't sell business, right? You could sell marriage help. You could be selling sex coaching, right? Like like you don't have to be selling business, right? Because I think some people are like, oh, it's like the business that whole like coaches and business has popped, right? But actually, if you look at it, like it's one of the key factors I'm noticing with people where that's their client base are having a wobble. Some people are severely impacted, and some people it's just like, oh, this is weird. Like things seem to be shifting, right? And that's what I want to say. It's like just say like having a wobble, just a little wobble, and then we're going to get back running. One high ticket offer I have noticed this very strongly at scale is having a wobble. So I have a lot of clients who are in their first like $100,000, $200,000 business that I would still call as like a very relationships driven, higher intimacy type of business that is maybe just one single high ticket offer. They aren't being impacted. But I'm noticing, and I actually had several conversations with people in multiple six-figure businesses that had gone like it's sort of been like a seller's market for like quite a few years inside of coaching. And so people who had grown very quickly, they'd gotten to like 500,000, a few 100,000. And it was like, wow, I need filters to like keep all the people out. They're all trying to like pay me so much money. And so these filters went into place. I was talking to one, I actually don't know if he's here, but like one guy messaged me, he did $500,000 last year. He's a relationships coach, right? And right now he's at 100,000 for the year, and we're at almost August, right? But anything can happen, right? The rest of the year could be coming up roses, but it's just like he's noticed a severe shift. And actually, when I looked at his, I went and I actually looked at his stuff when he messaged me, and I was like, oh, like it's a super high friction application, right? And so it's like not a very intimate relationships driven thing. It's like mass marketing, podcast, something like that. And then directly to a high friction sales application. That thing, if it's a low intimacy and there's not a lot of like necessarily trust and connection, that is something I've noticed can be an issue for people's businesses. Funnels with timers and scarcity have plummeted in their effectiveness. Dear God, good riddance. And then one of the other huge things I have noticed, and I've noticed this a lot with the big businesses that have folded, or if I'm behind the scenes and I'm like aware of things that are happening, there's a lot of businesses that scale because people are very strong marketers, but actually marketing is just the front end. So once you actually get into a scaled business, that's like your overhead, managing a team, having good systems and processes, all of the back end. And so there's a lot of businesses that were scaled by strong marketers that everything's on fucking fire on the back end, and their profitability was super low, that before they were just solving by like, I'm great at marketing, so like everything can be a mess, I'll just bring more people in. And then when sales slow, everything like it collapses. It's like a house of cards. It collapses very quickly. So that's one of the things I've noticed with people in higher six-figure, multiple seven-figure businesses. Okay, here's what's working. What I'm like noticing, like people don't seem to be impacted. Solopreneur, personal brand businesses, thriving in my world, in my experience from seeing what's happening with my clients. Relationships-driven businesses, thriving. Scaled businesses with energetic vortex offer suites are thriving, right? And so I like one of the things that I've talked to a lot of people about that see, they're like, wait, what? Like I used to just launch 2 times a year and I would bring in like 200 grand every launch, and then I would just be done for the year. And then all of a sudden, when it's like you're used to 200 grand coming in and then you launch and it's like 30 grand and then you have a team, you're like, oh shit, right? And so all of the sudden there's this like, wait, what's happening? Like, and sometimes, especially if you're in a bigger business, it can take a little bit more of a minute to turn the ship. But those that have businesses that had either like secret upsells, downsells, like things where there's pops of sales coming in all the time, it's like this vortex where something's always leading to something else. Those seem to be still popping like champagne. Okay, businesses with high customer lifetime value and retention are thriving. One of the things I've talked to a lot of people about who run ads is ads, like it's not like they're not working anymore, but sales it's just slower. They're still happening, but it's slower. So something that someone might used to rely on of like, oh, I just fill my audience with this many people, and then here I do this thing, and then like this much money comes in, that formula has changed. So the person might still buy, but they're going to be on the list for a longer period of time. And if you don't have something like a long tail trust funnel or a nurture sequence or something where you're welcoming that person in, because a lot of people, their business was set up of like, I fill my audience and I'm going to like sell to you. And if you don't buy at that point, you just get washed into my newsletter list and I don't do anything else with you. Right. And so that is not working very well anymore. Whereas like businesses that have, even if it's just like maybe a smaller number, like a small group program, like a mastermind or something, but they have very high delivery and strong relationships with their clients. Like those people are continuing to renew. So the customer lifetime value, the trust is there. And so the person is staying with them. That retention is holding a lot of people right now while they're figuring out what's happening with like the cold traffic that seems to be colder than it used to be, right? And then scaled businesses with strong backends are also thriving. Okay, let's talk about market changes. We're going to get in a time machine and go back 5 years ago. What was happening in the online space? This was actually very fun for me to like visit. And like, I had my mind was exploding, and you're going to be like so amazed with yourself if you've been in business for this number of years, right? So if we go back 5 years ago, bro, marketer systems were actually just starting to go super mainstream. So like ClickFunnels was founded in 2014 and had grown to 100 million business in just 5 years by 2019, 5 years ago, right? And that whole thing was like, okay, we've got the timers and the funnels and we wash the people and we do the thing and we move them in and we sell, and there's the scarcity and the urgency. And because that was something that was like, it is based on some buyer psychology stuff, and it was fairly new in terms of like how refined it was as a system, it was working quite well for a while. What else was happening 5 years ago? This fucking blows my mind. TikTok has only been around like 5 years, right? Like, so TikTok had come onto the scene. We'd seen stuff before, like Vine with the little 6-second videos, but like, really, let's tap into that for a minute. 5 years ago, Instagram was still like looking at pictures with long captions. What? Now let's go back 4 years ago. Anybody remember what was happening 4 years ago? COVID. So COVID had touched down in what, like February 2020 or something? And all of a sudden, like billions of people across the world with very little warning are like in their home for very long periods of time. And all of a sudden, the world was at home. The long commutes were done. The buzz of parties and social events, like everything ground to a screeching halt, right? And so all of a sudden, and then the government's fucking terrified. So what do they start doing? They start pouring money into the economy, right? And so what we have happening, which is almost, right, if you know business, it's people either have time or they have money, right? This was a short window where people had time and money. What? And what did they do with that? So a lot of people were like, oh, like this is time for me to really reflect on what I want to do with my life. And some people were like, I want to do my own thing. And a ton of people started businesses in 2020. There were other people that were like, I don't want to start a business, but my mental health is pretty fucked right now. And like, I could really use some support, right? And if you look, I looked up, I spent some time with the data. World Metrics reported a 60% rise in coaching clients during the COVID-19 pandemic, with the surge being attributed to like growing awareness of mental health and personal development, right? So like, this is literally just 4 years ago, this is what's happening. And then again, Instagram introduced Reels that year because TikTok had come in. And so Instagram's like, crap, we've got to bring video in. So video really just 4 years ago became something that we were even thinking about as people that ran digital businesses. Okay, let's go back to 3 years ago. Okay, so we're all at home, we have nothing else to do, and all of a sudden video's coming. So what happens, like all of these people start creating video content. And when the feeds start flooding with video content, all of a sudden you have to have a way to stand out with your video content. So all of a sudden everybody's talking about hooks. Make sure your thing has a hook. And all of a sudden people are like, you got to use the trending audio and point at stuff. Do you guys remember when it was like everybody was pointing at stuff? Right? And so that was really our reality. Like that was just coming in about 3 years ago, was when it was like, oh, okay, like if you want to grow your business, video is pretty much like something that all of the platforms are favoring. And then we've got a bunch of elder millennials like, I guess I'll point to stuff at Beats, right? And coaching and digital course businesses were booming because people were at home. They had nothing else to do. They had time and money, and they're flooding it into like, let me come out of this better, right? And we have social media and the algorithms favoring us. So all of a sudden, like we're able to market to people directly. They're all sitting at home watching us. What about 2 years ago? What's happening there? As more and more content floods the field, what happens? You have to think everything is adaptation and evolution. right? So as more content is flooding the field, then it's the rise of the attention economy. And as content marketing just becomes the norm for a lot of people, there's this massive boom in podcasts, daily social media content. And what started to feel honestly like a content treadmill, so many solopreneurs started resenting their businesses because they were like, I didn't get into business to do this. And like, everyone's telling me this is like what I have to be doing. And then the introverts were like, fuck this, this thing where I go on Instagram and like people are talking at me every time I open it, like makes me want to run away from the platform. And so the introverts have a rebellion and they go to things like Substack. And has anyone noticed, starting a couple of years ago, there's a rise back to long form content. Blogs had a comeback. We hadn't seen blogs since the early 2000s, right? And so whatever is happening in our field, we always want to be looking at the marketplace and looking at, wow, like it's like a pendulum, right? TikTok came in, flooded through the thing, brought video in. We even see LinkedIn feels TikTok-y these days, right? And then there's this swing back towards people who are like, oh, maybe I don't want so much of that. Maybe I want to be able to really drop in to an experience. Maybe I want to go to Substack. Maybe I want to read blogs, because this overwhelming flood of content is actually overwhelming for my nervous system, right? So like we're starting to notice, even if it just came in 4 years ago, and then by 2 years ago, there's like starting to be a swing back and sort of out of some people from that type of content. 2 years ago, I remember like all of a sudden my friends were like, have you noticed live call participation going down? And there was like a lot of content created about it. And it was like, oh, like the world is opening back up. The world is opening back up. And so all of a sudden, things that were super easy for us of like, everyone's just coming to the calls because they're available. All of a sudden, digital course creators, coaches were like competing for life. Someone who can be out there doing something. And some people, this prompted some creators, they moved to asynchronous support, right? And then some creators were like, how can I'm going to have to create more things and like be really creative to draw people in to come to the calls. And you don't see that as much with like high-end masterminds. People are like super committed there, but this was more in like lower end programs, memberships, things like that. There was like a wobble for sure with call participation. All right. Now we're just back 1 year ago. What's coming 1 year ago? Listen, can you believe ChatGPT like really just went mainstream pretty much last year? Like, look at everything that's happened in the last 5 years. And then also last year, what happens is all of a sudden people are like, why is my Instagram reach suddenly so low? And anybody who's an old lady like me is like, I've seen this play a fucking 1,000 times before, right? It's just like what a platform does. The social media platform in the very beginning, their goal is growth of users. So they make it super easy. They favor the algorithm. They want a lot of creators that are creating a lot of things. And if you remember, if you were in, I think around 2013, Facebook did this. Facebook business pages used to actually mean something, and businesses used to market on them. And now if you're a business starting today and you're like, should I have a Facebook business page? It's like, no, like unless you're running ads, because Facebook has moved to monetization, right? And so Facebook has moved to monetization. And so that's basically primarily where you're going to be getting like reach, is if you're running ads. Instagram's not fully there yet. So I don't know if they have like, I'm not an Instagram employee, but my background is ad tech. I know how these things go, right? And so it's like they are reducing reach because they want your money, right? And I think as businesses, that's something that it's like, I think some of us might need to like get over it and like boost posts and be like, you know what? That was super fun when I had a run where like I just got free exposure to like 1 million people all the time. But if I want to stay on this platform, I have to learn how to play in a way that actually allows me to reach. Like I have a client who has over 100,000 followers on Instagram. And she was like talking about how it's like usually like 3,000 people at a time will see her posts like on a good day, right? And so these are things that all of a sudden there's all of these swings that creators and people running coaching businesses are having to face that are so far outside of like, I just want to be coaching in my program, right? But like this is the context we're existing in. Also, market sophistication begins demanding better. We're gonna really talk about that in a little bit, so I'll just leave that there. And the federal declaration of COVID-19 as a pandemic just ended in May 2023. So just take a moment of gratitude for yourself. I know I just went through that like kind of fast, but if it has felt fast for you, you're not wrong. Like it's been an incredible amount of change in just 5 years. And it's not going to stop. So like, like if you've been around me, like I come from the tech industry and like, this is like, it's just known, like tech usually comes in giant waves. And so you'll see, like, we can look at how technology has sort of had bumps like this before. Look at that. Like I get chills actually looking at this of like the estimated impact of technology platforms on economic productivity. We've never seen anything like this before in literally human history around what technology is doing. And as digital business owners, we are right in the crosshairs of so much of what's happening. So for anyone who is not aware, Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI. They tried to give him a little boot. He found his way right back in, and it is unbelievable. So if you don't know OpenAI, like they run ChatGPT, the amount of money he's raising for ChatGPT, it is like larger than some giant, like some country's entire GDP for the year. Like that's the amount of money he's looking to raise to like pour more in. If you think AI is like pretty awesome, we haven't even seen anything yet. Like it is early days and it's already having a massive impact on so many businesses. It's been a wild ride these last few years. And here's where we get into another thing. So we've just set the sort of context of what was happening in the digital business space, right? What's happening sort of in the world that was impacting certain things. And one of the things we didn't see at the time, because this is actually one of the markers of this thing, is you don't see it at the time until it's after. But some segments of the coaching industry were massively what they're experiencing now, and we're like, what the fuck happened? Is that the pandemic and other external economic factors basically set up all the ingredients for certain parts of the coaching industry to form a gigantic, meteoric, awe-inspiring market bubble. All right, let's talk about market bubbles. Okay, we're going to economics class for a minute. What creates bubbles? So this was documented in 1986 by an economist, and there's literally, you can track it from the fucking tulips in Holland in the 1700s through to like different things in Europe. Like there's 5 phases of market bubbles. We're going to go through them. And we're going to talk about what does it have to do with coaching. Okay, displacement is the first phase of a market bubble. This phase occurs when investors, buyers, become enamored with a new opportunity, which they believe will lead to unprecedented future growth. The making of a bubble. What did we just rewind back to? 4 years ago, we saw something that like, I don't even think my parents had ever experienced, like a global pandemic, right? And due to the factors that were also happening with digital business and technology and where like workers were going with like demanding more flexibility, like it was this cauldron that was just bubbling, waiting for this new paradigm of a future opportunity. So suddenly and seemingly without warning, with all these people trapped in their homes, like people are entering they're like, okay, maybe I'll become a coach. Maybe I'll start a digital business. Maybe I'll do all these things. And there's a massive boom in things like life and health coaching with lonely people in their homes, choosing to come through hard times as better people to grow through the storm. So I think it's really interesting, and to highlight, like you're going to notice I highlighted certain dates. This article was written in 2021. Okay, journalists are already starting to track. There's this interesting thing. I'm a life coach, you're a life coach, the rise of an unregulated interest in an industry, right? So it's market enough at the time that journalists in 2021 are starting to be like, this is interesting. Then let's go to the euphoria phase. There's the boom. I think we've all experienced booms, and some of you might be having a lot of light bulb moments right now, but I have a really good screenshot that indicates the euphoria part. In this phase, asset prices skyrocket and rational decision-making diminishes as investors become consumed by the fear of missing out. I swear to God, my intuition just like led me to this. I don't even remember what I searched for, but I found, if anyone's familiar with the life coach school, 100% a gigantic market bubble. And I was like, I found this and I was like, oh, wow. Asset prices skyrocket. I actually think Brooke never changed it, but like she went from like 18,000 for a coaching certification to 21,000. But apparently on stage, and this was 2 years ago, so we're moving through the cycle, right? She says it's going to go from 18,000 and she's going to move it up to 35,000, right? In this phase, asset prices skyrocket. and rational decision-making diminishes. I got that fear of missing out vibe and started feverishly checking all my credit card limits. Like literally, this is textbook. It's literally textbook market bubble. Then it's interesting. I was like having lunch with a friend in the coaching industry, and she has a friend, and it was basically like he started in real estate and he saw last year what was happening with like there like some bubbles in the coaching industry. And he was like, you know what? I think it's a good year to like shut down and just travel the world with my wife. And they literally last year they were like profit taking. I'm just gonna get out because he could see based on apparently he was invested in Florida real estate in 2008. He was like, I've seen this before. I'm not going to be here again. And for a lot of coaching businesses, especially like for people, I have noticed if your coaching business sits on top of who you're selling to is a lot of people in LCS, you might be in the panic phase right now. And this is when things are plummeting, people are scrambling. It's like, what is happening, right? Like a little bit of like, what is happening? And then what are we seeing this year coming out is they spent their life savings on life coaching, right? And so I think this is not all of the coaching industry, but I was sitting in it. Like I was literally inside of it, and it's so obvious in hindsight, but I didn't even see it, right? To me, it had felt like I lived in San Francisco when tech was really coming up. And in my mind, I was like, oh, this is just like tech. There's like a total, like, this is just an industry booming that will continue. Like tech just has not, like, I remember living in San Francisco and real estate was going insane and people were like, it has to stop at some point. And it just like, it softened a little bit, but like it kept going because tech was holding it. Like tech genuinely had the economy to hold it. And now it's just like booming, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, all of that, right? And so when I was feeling this inside of the coaching industry, I was like, oh, this was just like when I was in San Francisco and like the tech was rising, right? And now I'm like, oh, this is like a market softening. This wasn't like a bull run. If anyone knows like bull markets versus bear markets, like this was a bubble. And I actually just thought this was like a really fun, you know that it's bad when people are making cartoons of you with your fingers holding strings, like holding people, right? I don't even think, to be super clear, I really like Brooke Castillo and I have she's helped my life a lot. But I don't even know if she was aware that she was like in a market bubble as she was creating it. I think it was just very strong beliefs that created something that didn't have the underpinning economics to hold it, and it burst. So as happens in panic mode, people catastrophize and freak out. Confidence in the market collapses and pessimism becomes pervasive. And then you'll notice fire sales. So this happened in the housing market. People are just like, let me sell off these assets, right? You'll notice like a digital court. Anybody notice some like fire sale behavior right now? It's textbook. It's textbook. And then the market stabilizes. It goes back to normal. The cycle is so normal, so predictable that an American economist created that entire framework on this is literally what happens. 1986, what is that? 30 years ago, 96? 2006, 16, 40 years ago, right? This was documented 40 years ago. We don't have to be like, oh my God, what's happening? It's like the economist told us 40 years ago. If you're just curious enough to look. And so and listen, I know a lot of you might not have been impacted by that at all. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? But I know that I know enough people that have experienced that bubble and they don't know what it is. And it's causing them a lot of suffering, right? So if you've been hearing the coaching industry is imploding, the market is collapsing, it's impossible to grow right now, that tale is as old as time, my friends. 2016, the spectacular collapse of life and business coaching. 2017, the business coaching industry is going to implode. 2020, why is the coaching industry starting to collapse? 2024, the coaching industry and business world is imploding. I haven't seen it yet. So interesting, right? You see things like that in 2016. All I saw was a boom when I entered the market 5 years ago, right? And so it's what we need to remember is maybe it's true. Maybe in 2016, whoever wrote that, their part of the industry had some sort of market bubble or explosion, but that wasn't my experience, right? And maybe whoever wrote, like, so who knows, right? Like who's catastrophizing and who was genuinely, like the same way some housing markets are impacted more than others at different times. The coaching industry is big, right? So it's like, well, this is what the coaching industry's experience. It's like, what? Like, that's such a big industry. What do you mean? Is it like the Austin housing market or Las Vegas? Because I'm going to show you that in a minute. It's very different, right? And so there's some parts of the coaching industry right now that are taking off. I just got an email from someone yesterday that their business is at 75% of what they did all of last year already, right? And so it's just, you've got to start to notice what part of the industry am I in and where is my market? So to be worried and freaking out would be like in 2008 being like, you know what? Houses are out. No one's going to live in houses anymore. And people will no longer seek shelter. They're just done with houses, right? That's just not a thing. There is demand for coaching services. But what might be true is same in that, and when the housing market experienced what it did in 2008, you might be in certain parts of the industry that might have a genuine softening right now. And bubble bursts, unlike industry deaths, are temporary. Listen, I started my career selling newspaper ads at the San Francisco Chronicle. That was a downward trajectory that was not coming back, my friends. Newspapers were an industry that was literally dying, and I was there while they were like trying to figure out how do we move to digital. There was no coming back from that. They just figured out how to transform and be in a different industry. That's not coaching, right? So even if you're experiencing something that feels like a softening or a burst right now, actually all data points to like growth. And even if we're going to like tie this into if anyone was alive, if you guys were like old enough in 2008 to have felt or experienced like what happened with housing, I want you to consider, even in what was considered to be the Great Recession, and I know I have some international people, I don't know like who's from what countries, so like map this to whatever like maybe you might have seen in your own country. I'm focusing on where I live, which is the US. Even in the Great Recession, there was a rise in median household income across quite a bunch of different places, right? And so when we say like, this is a crisis, it's like, where? Because it seems to be going quite well in some places. And then we just have to wonder like, okay, what do the patterns seem to be? And how can we put ourselves in flow of those? So the last thing I wanted to point out is the graph that I showed you a minute ago is actually, this is literally a graph from the housing market crisis. This orange one was Las Vegas, right? Look at like how high it was and how low it went. This sort of reddish pinkish line was the overall US housing market. And this yellow line is where I live, Austin, Texas. Right. And so this is just to show you, even in what was considered to be one of the worst national crises we've ever had in the housing market. I didn't live in Austin yet. I was in San Francisco at that time, but like Austin was like, we're fine. Austin, like if you look here, 2008, look, it barely dips, right? Like that's enough of a softening in the market that nobody would even wonder what's happening, right? Whereas something like this, and then we've got to be like, oh, okay, so like what was the difference? And in Las Vegas, what it was speculative investing. Everyone was buying a house on the assumption that houses will always increase in price and that like that's just what you should do. So the price was going up and up and up, and there wasn't the underpinning economics to actually hold the market, and it collapsed. There were also a lot of subprime lending. If you remember that whole subprime thing. And it was interesting. Like I even have friends who were like part of it. They like worked in that industry and they were like, we didn't even see it at the time. Right. And so a lot of these bubbles you don't see until afterwards. And you're like, shit, we should have known, right? If we're giving a lot of loans to people that like don't have great credit, what's gonna like, it's gonna come due. Right. And so I think there's like, and I've noticed there's like some pockets. I was in an event last year where they were trying to sell like, I think it was like an $80,000 offer to like completely new business owners. And then they were like, we've got the finance person, the lender at the back of the room. And I'm like, this is a Las Vegas market that's getting created right now. Like what the fuck is happening? Right. And so just for everyone to know, like, sometimes you have to like grow the wisdom of this and live through it. But I bet you a lot of people went through 2008 and they never learned this stuff, right? So it's like, if they didn't learn it then, hopefully you're learning it now. And you can know in business, there's market cycles. It's natural. So some part of the coaching industry experiencing fallout of a popped bubble, while others are completely unaffected, the same way Las Vegas and Austin had entirely different experiences of the year 2008. And here's the actual math on the coaching industry. We don't need to read through all of it, but actually like all of the data points to like everything is continuing to grow. Everything is actually like, and I was actually floored. The meditation market is like really exploding, right? And so if we look at actually what the data is, there's growth. So how do you put yourself in stream of it? And then I kind of nerded out and I wanted to find like, where do we see interesting things that show larger shifts? This is when I like, as someone who's like been in business a long time, I like to look at like, what does this tell me? That a company like Chipotle is adding personal development offers. And the reason was they wanted better retention for their fast food workers. And their fast food workers wanted to actually better themselves. That tells you something, right? If a large conglomerate like Chipotle is like personal development matters and this is going to help retain employees, we want to track that as business owners in the coaching industry. My husband works at Atlassian. At this point, like they have literally on staff there, you can work with a coach, you can work with the therapist, and they can match you with whoever you want to work with. And they have 52% usage of their employees. I remember when I was growing up, it was like weird if you talked about your therapist. And now it's almost like a marker of like you are evolved, right? And so it's interesting to look at like 52% has like they've outstanding usage and 30% of the employees use the benefit on a recurring basis. So we want to start to track like, oh, if companies are tracking, this matters to people. And if we implement this, it will help retain them as employees. That's showing consumers value it. This one, like, it's not as perfectly related to coaching, but I recently went to Walmart and I thought it was so interesting that like there's a movement towards understanding neurodiversity and the brain and people being different from other people and introducing sensory friendly hours for a couple hours every day. Like Walmart is implementing things like that. That's how going mainstream this mindfulness of like our mental health, our well-being is. And if we track mindfulness in academic journal titles from 1980 to 2022, look at that. It's unbelievable, the movement towards understanding the importance of mental health, the importance of coaching, the importance of mindfulness. Like, this isn't an industry death. This is actually like we're on a really nice trajectory up. So the growth is happening. There's massive opportunity available. And you get to decide in what capacity you'd like to participate and be involved within. How much of that growth do you want to be part of yours? It's always interesting to me when someone's in like a $30,000 a year business and they're like, my market's really saturated. I'm like, literally, what's your market cap? And then like, if they look it up, it's like, oh, like this many hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's like, okay, so like, you're telling me at 30,000, you literally, and the market cap is hundreds of millions. Like, I'm pretty sure there's room to grow. But what about, you're listening, you're like, listen, Kathryn, that was interesting about the bubble, but like, I'm not from LCS and like, that's not whatever part of the industry I'm in. And all of a sudden though, my offers and my marketing that used to sell just aren't anymore. Let's talk about market sophistication. Don't get intimidated by the fancy term. It's super simple. Let's cover it through a different industry, wine. So when someone comes in and they're like interested in drinking wine, literally they're just like, I don't know what kind of wine I like. I don't even know, do I like red wine or do I like white wine? That's how like unaware the consumer is, right? Then the person starts beginning to drink some wine and they're like, okay, like I can see that like I prefer red. And I seem to think I like, of all the reds that I've tried, I think I tend to like the Pinots the most. So you can see as they're moving in and engaging and immersing themselves in the world, their consumer preferences are getting more nuanced. They're becoming more sophisticated buyers. And at the advanced level, an advanced wine drinker will tell you not only what their favorite varietal is, but they will tell you what terroir. They will tell you like literally, like I like Pinot Noir from Willamette Valley. That's my favorite. And maybe like Burgundy from like this particular region, whatever, right? Like the French Burgundy. Right? And they can tell you with that level of sophistication because the buyer has spent enough time purchasing and engaging with those offers that they know what they want. And so if you look then, if we're going to map this onto wine, I like just look at this. Which one do you think belongs to which? Okay. Offer characteristics, affordable, easy drinking. And so their marketing strategy is clear labeling and messaging focused on basic taste preferences. Wonder which one that one is. Offer characteristics, mid-range priced wines with more refined characteristics. Their strategy is educational content about varietals and possibly even sharing what food pairings would go best with the wine. Then premium wines with terroir-specific qualities. And their marketing strategy is not clear labeling and focusing on basic taste preferences, and it's also beyond food pairings. They're talking about the nuances between literally, and if you go wine tasting, like I lived in San Francisco for a while, we would go wine tasting, they would tell us, like, taste this one. This is from this plot up this way. Now taste this same varietal and it's from this plot over this way. It's like the nuance between literally the same property of land and how one got a little more rainfall impacted how the grapes grew and how it tasted. And for an advanced wine drinker, they want to know about that. They want to know the nuances between the land plots. They want to hear about the winemaker's expertise. They want to learn about the exclusive vintages. We're like, oh, okay, like, listen, I'm a Pinot drinker, right? So like there's certain ones where like with Pinot, there's like, they have to work really hard to go down on. So some lower like rainfall years, like the grapes have to work harder. So the grapes get more concentrated in flavor. Those are like the best vintages, right? If I were to like talk to someone that like didn't know about wine, they'd be like, I don't care. Like, I don't even know what I like, right? But you can see it's like, I've become an advanced buyer. I know what I want. And so people who are selling me wine are going to have to sell it differently to appeal to me. So there's enough room in the wine industry for yellowtail, for like basic buyers who are like, I don't even know what I want. I just want the cheap thing. I'll just grab whatever. And I don't know. I like literally used ChatGPT. I was like, what's like a mid-range wine? They said Kendall Jackson. I see it sometimes. And it's funny because like in my like advanced mind, Kendall Jackson and yellowtail are the same, but apparently they're considered different. And then something like Opus One, that is like a very high-end brand. It's like, you know, very expensive, hard to get the wine, all of those things, right? But the brand of every one of those wines, that determines, right? Am I like a sort of like low end everyday kind of buyer? So my price point is for the person who's like, doesn't really know much and like they're just sort of getting their feet wet, or that they don't value it. Like there's some people that literally will drink yellowtail their whole life and they're not on a journey towards having like a super refined palate and like going to visit different like countries and their like wineries, right? And so there's some people that will live their entire life being yellowtail drinkers and they're not going to move up, right? Then there's other people that start with yellowtail and then they move up further. And I hope that you're mapping this onto your industry right now, because like this is very much what happened in the coaching industry, right? Because the brand that every like company is will determine who's the ideal buyer for that brand. And that ideal buyer wants a certain price point. And there's a very specific type of messaging that's going to easily sell the offer. You could see literally, let's just go back and look, right? It was not hard to map those. And you can see it's so easy to see in something like wine, but this is happening in coaching. So remember this, people whose base is digital entrepreneurs or coaches, even if they don't sell business, are having a wobble. Along with the boom from the pandemic came a rush of options, a rush of content that educated new people. So someone that maybe before the boom of podcasts and all of the short form video and everything, like maybe it would have taken them like a few years to go from a basic buyer to a more sophisticated buyer. What all of this rush did was it compressed the cycle in the sophistication of the market, right? And so what we're seeing now is there was like all of this rush. They're all consuming all this content. There's all this content available. They're getting more sophisticated more quickly. A rush of people buying the sort of lower end. Like, do you guys remember? There's like certain things that maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, it was like, get to $100,000 in your coaching business. And like that at the time, 3 or 4 years ago, was like, oh, yes, that sounds great. And now it's like laughable, right? It's just like, it's so like basic that it's like, okay, like you're going to like raise your eyebrows. It's like, yeah, you and everybody else, Susan, right? That's messaging sophistication. The market has gotten more sophisticated. Your messaging has to reflect that. And so this means as the markets become more sophisticated, there's more nuanced consumer preferences, which means the messaging that was crushing it just a few years ago, all of a sudden it's like deaf ears, right? It's like, yeah, you and everybody else. Thank you for my quantum leap, Bob. Can't wait, right? Like so many different things. And I remember there was a point even where I was like using like magnetic in a lot of my wording with the Brand Alchemy Accelerator. And then I noticed like I was getting fucking bored with like everybody selling being magnetic. I was like, I gotta say something different. Like this is becoming so like we're getting like inundated with like certain types of messaging, because what happens when someone sees this is working, there's a movement towards it and then it stops working, right? Like the messaging that was like, ooh, this is really interesting. All of a sudden people get more sophisticated and we need to shift our messaging. And here's the thing, in some cases, for some of my clients, it's just the messaging. And then for others, like it might genuinely be like your offer is basic. Maybe your market has really become more sophisticated and literally the underpinnings of the offer that you're selling need to be refreshed and reinvigorated to meet your market's current desires and needs. So if you are serving a market, it doesn't just have to be digital business owners or coaches, but just really feel into, have you noticed you're serving a market that's like there's been a lot of growth and movement inside of that space in recent years? And then if you've noticed your sales have slowed, look at your messaging. Is there something where you need to be actually updating and shifting your messaging to up level it to where the market currently is? Or does it go kind of beyond that? And you're like, actually, like I need to actually reinvigorate my offer because what was working 5 years ago is no longer, like my market has become more sophisticated and I can see this, and this could come in and make it even better. Okay. And what if your market is more beginners? Okay. So we're just going through and you're like, okay, there hasn't been a huge shift in market sophistication, but sales are still weird for you, right? You're like, okay, Kathryn, that was cool about the bubble. That's cool about the market sophistication, but like, I don't think those are my thing. What else could it be? There's macroeconomic things. And the coaching industry does not exist in a bubble. It's in an industry, in a sea of industries, in an overall economic landscape, right? And like when I was the director of business development, scaling 8 and 9 figure tech companies, I wasn't just looking at what's happening in the tech industry. Like if we were selling to media companies, I was like, what's happening in the media industry? And what do we have to be aware of that we might need to navigate as we're scaling, right? So it's like, you need to be aware of your industry and what your market is. If you sell to a specific market, what's happening with that market? Right? So just like no man is an island, no industry is an island. We're all interconnected, like it or not, right? And like everything else in life, your ability to see what's coming is dependent on your ability to see that interconnectedness and be like, huh, that's interesting. Like really just be curious. When you start to notice things that you're like, that's different, take a moment. I think for me, it's like just a lot more natural. I've been in business for almost 20 years. So it's like, when I start to see things on the news, I'm like, oh, okay, let me pay attention to that. So what's happening in our industry? Well, not unrelated industries, actually, that seem to be signaling something that we should be looking at, right? And this is something recently I was like, I never watched the news, but I was on a road trip with my family. I don't know. I guess this was actually a few months ago because this was like a story that broke in May. And what came up on the screen was this big story that broke about Walmart and how Walmart was like had this massive, not massive, but like for it to grow 3.8% in a quarter is actually massive for Walmart. So like all of a sudden potential investors were like, do we go all in on Walmart? And then this is actually how things become bubbly. Like the ex-Walmart CEO was like, don't do that because like this is just like a temporary thing, right? But the bulk of gains in Walmart sales coming from households with an income of $100,000 or more. Interesting, yes? So last October, the ex-CEO mentioned that like he could see some things coming and he was like, you know what? Like for the first time in a decade, like they started to see it last year with lower income buyers, like discounts weren't as useful because like lower income buyers were like really feeling squeezed with like the rise in grocery expenses and inflation. And I don't know, things that like, I think I'm in a tax bracket. I didn't even notice or feel it, right? But there's some tax brackets that feel it, right? So like if you serve someone who's like a lower income buyer, they might genuinely feel squeezed in like a way that's not just their thoughts, right? But really interesting. In Q1 of this year, higher income consumers shifted from going to like Whole Foods or whatever. And they're like, I don't know, maybe I'll go to Walmart for a little bit. Like I can save some money here. That's an interesting behavioral shift that if we serve someone who's in that household income bracket, It's not that the spending's stopping, but it's shifting. And we want to mark that as business owners, right? And he even said in his press release, he basically was telling them like, oh, you can see here in this, affluent consumers are creating a bubble. So he was telling Wall Street, he was like, don't throw all your money into Walmart. Like, don't make it worse. Like, we expect this is just temporary. And this is why we're seeing it. And so he basically said, when we see inflation go down and service becomes more important than price, we're definitely going to notice those consumers are not going to stay with us. That's not our like target market. It's just because of what's happening in macroeconomic forces. They're just here for a minute and they're going to leave us. Then let's talk about being in a scaled business, because one of the other things we've noticed is coaching witch hunts for like some people in scaled businesses. And some of it maybe seems like, I don't know, useful or like not even useful, but like warranted. But there's this thing that seems to happen that when like a business scales, all of a sudden like consumer minds start to associate it with institutions. And what we also see is an almost 50% decrease in trust in across the board institutions in things like big business from 1979 to 2023. Also, what could also be impacting people is like, it's an election year. And there was just like, listen, I do not like Donald Trump at all, but that's terrifying to me, right? That like, we're at a point where like, I was just with my neighbors at a party on Saturday night and like someone looks at their phone and like, holy shit, like someone just tried to like assassinate Trump. Can you see how like, maybe that's not related to someone's finances, but it makes people feel really uneasy. Right? And so if we look at things where it's like, what happens when trust falls like that? When what's held us as a society for so long is institutions, and what we're seeing across the board is trust plummet across institutions, with things like Congress has an 8% trust rating. What does that do on a larger scale for people and their like belief in the future? Then there's always a positive. Overall, the new poll found that small businesses enjoying the most public trust, with 65% of Americans having a great deal or fair amount of confidence in it. So it's so interesting because when I went on this hunt, because I'm like, I'm noticing patterns. I wonder what this like data is around this. Very much like my people who are in smaller businesses where there's high relationships, high intimacy, like things are flying like champagne on New Year's. There's been no issue whatsoever. And it's just interesting to track like how our buyer psychology, like if you just start to get associated with something else, it has nothing to do with you, but like things can be impacted, right? Also, America's having a vibe session. Anybody heard that word? So the Vibe session has gone global as of April 2024, with citizens around the world fearing an unsustainable financial future. And what's so fascinating about why it's called a Vibe session is like, you know how everybody's like, wait, are we in a recession? Like people have been Googling that for like years. They're like, are we in a recession yet? Like it feels weird. Inflation's higher. Are we in a recession? But like all the metrics, right, that like the Fed is usually tracking, or like that like the institutions that be are tracking to see, are we in a recession? We're not. But no one can help but notice like there's just this uneasiness that people are experiencing around their belief in what's going to happen in the future, right? And so what a vibe session, there's literally a term for it now, right, that the journalists cover. And it's the paradox between hard data of what's actually happening and sentiment. And what is so interesting is like, it doesn't really matter like what the data says if someone's experience of it is like, yeah, but like, I don't feel great, right? That's going to impact their spending behavior, even if they're actually, if we look at like their finances, they're fine. Ooh. Okay. So wait, we're actually totally fine. Most people right now are actually totally fine. Most people are actually doing great right now. Like if you are in a certain lower income bracket, you might be feeling squeezed, but like most higher income people, yeah, they're shifting a little bit of their spending to Walmart, but like sales are they're just shifting where they're spending, right? But some people, if they're feeling uneasy about the future, that makes them do the squirrel before winter thing, right? And so going back to who's being impacted, I've noticed a lot of people that have like it's just like nothing to like low intimacy, high ticket. Like they're being impacted a lot more than other businesses. And it's because the way the buyer psychology of high ticket purchases is different than buyer psychology of other purchases. So what we're noticing is just sort of the cauldron of what we're in. It's going to impact certain types of businesses more than others. Okay, let's talk about the energetics of 2024. No matter where you are in the market, you might right now be like, shit, I think I'm in the Las Vegas part of the coaching industry. And some of you might just be like, I feel like I'm in Austin. Like, I feel like it's like, I'm noticing like it's almost like you're hearing so much about it out in the ether. You're like, I don't know. Am I experiencing something? Like, you don't know, right? No matter where you are, it actually doesn't matter. Like your energetic experience of it is to map yourself into here. Cause I want you to notice this. I literally listen, I liked this graph. Even in Las Vegas, when there was this huge plummet and a bubble burst, there was still hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, no, I guess 180 million, right, per year in real estate transactions, like flying across the industry at any given time. Yes, it was much lower than it was, but that was still hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And so wherever you are, just stay here. Stay here. Look, there's still sales constantly happening. And where we get really fucked up as business owners is if we start to notice a market softening and then we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so far away from where I was. Oh my gosh, like I've got to get back. Oh my gosh, I'm in a contraction. Oh my gosh, I feel like it's all slipping away. Or I have to rebuild. Even like the energy, you might be like, no, but it's true. Like this feels like these things aren't working and I just have to rebuild. Check in with your body. Just check in with how that feels, right? Versus like really just feeling into like this cycle of like sort of what doesn't serve you always falling away and new things always coming in. And there's always, even in the worst housing crisis we've seen, I think probably in American history, right? Like everything was fine in some markets within less than a year. And nationally, the average was a few years. And then Las Vegas took longer. But also, this isn't like a real estate market where like, if you're like, oh man, I'm in the Las Vegas part, like you can move to another market a lot easier because you're a digital business. You just like, you join a summit with 10,000 people in like a different part of the coaching industry and you just fill your audience with new people. That's it. So you want to focus on the feeling of constant money, opportunity, and sales occurring no matter the cycle. No matter the cycle. Sales are happening every day with or without you. And can you put yourself in flow of that energy? Sales are happening, whether or not I choose to participate in them. And if you actually can feed into that feeling energetically of like, I feel it as like the whirring of commerce, you know, Mars energy, it moves real fast, right? Like money loves speed. And like, I can feel the energy of sales just like whirring across me. And I'm like, how do I don't necessarily need to move super fast. I just need to put myself in flow of where the commerce wants to go. Okay, let's talk about the strategies for 2024. Okay, this is, you guys know my background is tech. And so I oftentimes like, I'm looking towards like, I grew a lot of businesses in the tech industry and then I moved into coaching. And someone who's very well known in the tech industry is a guy named Andy Grove. And he actually was kind of hard on tech companies because he was a little bit of a pessimist. And he started to notice as the CEO of Intel, he navigated Intel through some hairy shit and like really grew them massively. So like any sort of like startup founder, like if you ask them who they look up to, it's like Steve Jobs and, you know, like Andy Grove is probably usually in like the top 3 to 5, right? And so what he brought to the tech industry was like, hey, tech founders, like you guys are, it's great. I love that you guys are always thinking about the future and you're always thinking about what's possible. But when that tends to be where your brain goes, you're not prepared for market downturns. You're not prepared for unforeseen challenges. And it's so funny because I read this book like so long ago when I was like working as like an executive in tech, and it like resurfaced in my subconscious. And I was like, holy shit, like this is a thing for a lot of, because if you think about coaching and personal development, it's like focusing on the future, focusing on possibility, which is beautiful in certain market cycles, right? But it's the kind of thing that if some businesses right now feel like they're fucking blindsided, it's like what Andy Grove was saying, right? It's like, if you're just focused here, you're going to be in stream with the market during certain cycles. And then actually you're going to feel like you're whapped upside the head. And so it was really interesting for me to notice. My husband works in tech. Tech has had a huge number of layoffs in the past 2 years, because when COVID stuff like really had a boom in tech, and like a lot of those businesses started massively hiring, and the economy didn't hold. It was just like a little bit of a boop, like a bump, right? And then it kind of softened back. And so like, it was just so fascinating for me, because I'm like, oh, I think this is an issue for a lot of coaching CEOs, is that they are unprepared for market downturns and unforeseen challenges. And so he highlighted that when you have that sort of way of being, it's great, like allow yourself to have that, but don't be so blind to strategic inflection points where there's moments of significant change that require companies to adapt rapidly or risk failure. So in his words, a strategic inflection point is a time in the life of business when its fundamentals are about to change. That change can mean an opportunity to rise to new heights, but it may just as likely signal the beginning of the end. And if you feel into what's happening in the coaching industry, it is the beginning of the end for some parts of the market, right? Like there's a big falling off, and then there's this new rise. There's this new rise. And so this brings us back to the beginning. When we tapped into what's happened in 5 years, Sam Altman, the head of AI, like tweeting, like, I don't think there has ever been more simultaneous technological revolutions going on than right now. That's a strategic inflection point. If you're a coaching business, but you don't coach in person, you're actually a digital business, which actually, like, it's just very interesting. Like now that I've gone to scale, things feel texturally very similar to me when I was working in startups and tech. Right? Like, so no, you might not be a tech business, but if you're in digital business, this is something, particularly as you scale, that's going to impact you. So I know I said that I was going to provide some context. I hope you had your popcorn and a nice cold drink. We're now back to the flow chart. Okay. If you are experiencing slower sales in 2024, the first question you have to ask yourself, given all of the context that we went through today, is your market facing genuine financial constraints, right? Like maybe you serve your like general person isn't like a $25,000 to $30,000 a year household income. So for someone like that, if grocery prices go up, like, I don't know, I think my friend told me that they've gone up 30%. I'm like, I haven't even noticed, right? But like, I guess that's the thing, right? So if grocery prices have gone up and your margins are super low, you would be cutting things, right? Because you would go back to, what are my essentials? I need to buy groceries, right? And so if you're serving a market like that, then the answer is yes. And then we've got to ask, how severely has your market been impacted? Is it severe and widespread, or is it mild and acute? That's the first one we're going to visit, because they have different solutions if it's severe and widespread versus mild and acute. And to solve a problem properly, we have to first understand its root cause. If you've ever worked with me in programs, I'm like, let's get to root cause and pull it out by the root and just be done with it, right? So if you are noticing slower sales and you're feeling into this and you're like, yes, Kathryn, my market, it's not just their thoughts, right? Like they're in a part, maybe it's like, maybe they're in a lower household income, or maybe you're someone where you're like, shit, like I know, Kathryn, I know you from the LCS world. And like my market is a lot of those coaches who like spent their life savings on life coaching. Like then that would also go into the severe and widespread, right? And so then that you need to look at that. Okay, so if you're looking at it and you're like, actually, it's severe and widespread, it's really bad right now for them, for my market and who I'm selling to. Of the 5 root causes we're going to go through, this is the only one that's hard to fix. And it's not even that hard. But I do just want to like let you know, if your market, if it's genuinely severe and widespread, like it might take a minute, right? And so it is a matter of you like looking at, you have to either like expand your market outside of the impacted area while maintaining like the same like client avatar. So if we use like the LCS example, like, did you know that actually like most of the rest of the industry is like doing fine? Maybe they're facing a little bit of like macroeconomic stuff, but they're doing fine. Like you could just go like meet, like it was interesting. Like I went through IPEC, right? So like maybe it's like, oh, can I do something to go actually meet a lot of IPEC coaches because they're having a very different experience, right? Like that would be one way where it's like the same kind of client, but it's a very different sort of subset of the market, right? Maybe if you work in maybe if your clients come from a certain geography that's been really hard impacted, is there a way that you can work in a slightly different market, right? Like those are the kinds of things you need to look at. Like there's some people right now that are fine. The other thing that I know that has worked for some of my friends who are in markets right now that are kind of like bursted bubbles where there has been like kind of severe and widespread stuff is if they were in a scaled business, not everyone in the market's going to be impacted. And so really like focusing, like some people have even shut down group programs and gone back to one-on-one because there's enough demand there still in like the higher part of the market that they can make the same income that they were making before. And the market's going to come back. It might take them a minute to sort of build or refill their audience with different people or whatever the thing is. But that's another thing that you could look at is like, is there a different offer structure that allows me, it's really more scaled businesses that I think are in a little bit more of a pickle in this particular market, because you basically rely on like tons of people within the same pool wanting to come at the same time. So if there's tons of people, all of a sudden it's different, that impacts obviously your sales. And if you're listening to this and you're like, no, it's not that, like, it's not like this isn't like doomsday in my market, but it is like kind of like mild and acute. Like people do genuinely seem to be like, they notice the price of chicken tripled or something, right? Like they're a little bit more price sensitive. So that's an example where maybe the solution for you, maybe over the past few years, you're like paying full only, hot friction. I've got lots of demand. Maybe it's like just like real estate. There's buyers markets and there's sellers markets. You've got to reduce some of your friction, right? So a lever you could pull is like offering payment plans to offer more flexibility to those who they've got the funds, but they're just feeling a little bit pinched. So they want to be spending the money, but without the payment plan, it just feels too pinchy for them, right? You could announce programs earlier and extend out a very early bird enrollment that allows extended payment plan options. You could also introduce high value, lower price point front end offers that provides high immediate value to the client and allows them to get into like maybe where they were going to shift on their own was like maybe they weren't going to buy, but if they get a taste of your work, you're like, no. If they taste it, like they will actually like prioritize, like they still have the money and they will prioritize it. Then that's something where it's like you could introduce something lower to have them come in, taste how awesome it is to work with you. And then actually like that will make the higher level offers, it will feed them a little bit more. Okay, now let's talk about it. If you're looking at this and you're like, my market is like not really like not price sensitive. I don't think it's a financial thing. And listen, because I do think it's not like there's only one issue happening, right? Like there could be multiple like parts of things at play depending on who your clients are. So maybe you're like, you know what? Maybe they're like a tad. They feel like maybe there could be a tad of actual financial constraint, but that's mostly not what it is. The next sort of troubleshooting place I would take you is what's the objection or hesitation you're receiving? I've also talked to a lot of scaled businesses that y'all aren't even fucking talking to your customers anymore. And that's a big problem, right? So if you're just like, I don't know, because I don't do sales calls anymore, like you've got to open up conversations. You have to hear what is happening. And maybe you know your market enough, but if your sales have slowed and they're not popping in, it's very useful to talk to your customers to hear what's happening so that you can have a sense of what you can shift in your business to come back into the flow of the commerce, right? So you might be hearing, I've already done that, or I've done something like that before. I did this person's program, I did that. That has one root cause, we'll cover it. Other people are like, like this sounds good. Like, I don't know, I think now isn't quite the right time, like maybe later, right? That could be like a variety of other root cause things, but it's one in particular. We'll talk about it in a minute. And then there's some people that might just be like, no, I've like invested in some shit and like has not been what I thought it would be. And so like, I have fear, like investing trauma, basically. Like I have fear of like a lack of trust and I want to hire you, but like, I'm nervous. Like some of my clients have like heard that, right? Like I experienced this and this was my, I had a bad experience. I didn't get what I thought. Like the contract was written away that like, I just have like, I'm nervous about investing again. So which one is it? If you're hearing, I've already done that, the root cause is your market has become more sophisticated and it's almost definitely either you've got to work on your brand and brand differentiation or offer differentiation, right? And oftentimes that's coming from your brand, right? If you have a very strong brand, then you likely have a very specific process that you walk someone through that's unique. It's different from everyone else. So they wouldn't say, I've already done that, right? And so if people see you as the same as all the other people, That's the brand issue. Because then they're like, no, I've already done that before with this person. And they don't see how working with you would be different. So they don't see the value essentially, right? So you actually have to become more sophisticated in the way that you're communicating about it. If the offer is still relevant, then the fix is likely just refining your messaging to speak to where the market has advanced to. And in some cases, like we talked about before, your offer might genuinely need to be like restructured and reinvigorated to reflect where the market is going. If you're hearing now isn't the right time, again, I'm talking to a lot of people all at once. And so like, I'm sort of speaking in broad strokes, right? But like oftentimes the energy of that comes from there's nervousness about something in the future. Right. And so it could be macroeconomic. It could be like, I'm afraid of what my future will look like if I purchase this, right? It's like something about uncertainty of the future. And so if you are hearing that, there's a couple different things. And again, this is like, depending on your brand, you're either going to attract a lot of you're either going to lend towards more logical buyers or more emotional buyers. If you attract more logical buyers, your messaging fix is ROI focused messaging and really focusing on the long-term value of making that investment. Whereas if you're more of like, maybe you're more in the spiritual space, more deep emotional, like that's your magic, then your magic is actually having deep depths of content that like evokes the strength of the human spirit. Right. And I think what you think about when people go into fear, they're not in their spiritual being, they're in their human being having like a very human reaction. And so what you can do is if you can pull someone back into that bigger part of themselves and evoke the strength of the human spirit, that also is something that moves the person towards the sale, right? You can also, like if it's not outside of just your messaging, you can offer more flexible payment options. And so if the buyer has money, but they just are hoarding it because they're scared. Like, can we have a minute of like compassion for that? Of like, there's like, really like, I was shaken up when there was like I don't like Trump. And when I'm like seeing him like close to assassination, like if that had happened, just what would be happening in the country? Like that scares me, right? And so there's certain things where it's just like, if people are genuinely uncertain right now, that creates this hoarding energy. Right. And so you could create something like putting out more payment plan options to make that versus the pay in full, which like sometimes in like it can feel like this big, this feels good. But in times when people are nervous, like it can be a little bit of this energy, right? And can we have compassion for that? There's also mini offers or trial opportunities is something that you can offer to people to start with a smaller commitment so that they can really start to build some confidence around the power of your work. And then expand the scope as they're seeing positive results. The next one is fear of being burned again, where the root cause is like, it's a trust issue. And actually it's interesting because I said that like the hardest one is when people genuinely don't have money. I'm going to actually like edit that. I think this one can be hard too. Because like, how do you navigate when we look at things about like the trust in institutions and like where things are? Can we have compassion for like when someone genuinely feels like they can't trust someone? Like, man, like I can even feel like my nervous system downregulating, like how I would want to meet that person. Right? Like how I would want to meet someone where it's like maybe they did genuinely have an experience where they like trusted and hoped so much and they didn't like experience what they thought they would. And can we have also a moment of compassion for that buyer? And so in that moment, we have to then think about where is the buyer in that? And there's an energetic piece here, right? Where we're looking at, do you genuinely feel safe? Right? Because put yourself into like buyer psychology. If something happens and your trust breaks, you didn't do anything as a service provider. You had nothing to do with that experience. But maybe if you're a coach and they worked with another coach, then they'll map on coaches are bad. Coaches try to take advantage of like whatever the thing is, whatever the experience. And then that map in their mental map, like they paint you potentially with that. It had nothing to do with you. Right. And so then it sucks, right? Like it sucks that you're like, I'm like, what? Like I've done nothing. Like I have incredible customer testimonials. Like people are so happy with me, but like, can we just breathe deep and be like, okay, but like, if you're in a market where something like that might have happened, or you've seen a pattern of that, are you showing up in a way where you energetically feel like a safe space, right? Like, are you sort of in and out? Like, are you not, like, is it unclear if you'll even be there, right? Like, people have like bought stuff and then the person like disappears, right? And so then people are like, is this person even be there? Like, have you shown repeatedly that like you're going to be there? Like, do you have a track record of like showing up for your people? This is also where there's opportunities for things like featuring client satisfaction rates, right? Like, it's interesting. Like, I have run the Brand Alchemy Accelerator for years, and it wasn't until about 6 months ago that I ever even talked about or mentioned. I guess it was, yeah, it probably was about 6 months ago, because we've had every single year we've ever run our client survey to that program, we've had literally 100% client satisfaction. Like, I don't hear that from anyone else in the coaching industry. Like, literally not a single client has been dissatisfied with their investment. And so that was something for me where I was like, oh, that seems important, right? Like, for people to hear that, if people feel like fear of investing, if you have data like that, that's useful to share, because then it helps someone, like, obviously, if it's really like an emotional hang up thing, but if they deeply desire to work with you, if there's something where you have like maybe stats around the percentage of client retention, the numbers of like the people that continue to work with you, the client satisfaction rates, those things are little things that you can thread in that, for a person who has trust issues, but they genuinely want to work with you, it helps them feel safer. Okay. You can also increase transparency and set clear expectations. So this could be something where maybe like if you run like a digital course business and like, listen, I bought some digital courses and I'm like, I don't, nope. I just spent thousands of dollars. Like, I'm not going to use this. Right. And so like it's funny because like for me, I just still invest, but for some people, maybe that $3,000 was a lot of money and they're like, I'm never doing that again. So maybe for you, it's like, if you are hearing that from a lot of people, maybe it just means more detailed walkthroughs of your portal. Or maybe if you have, maybe if you're not a digital course business, is there some way that you can help someone actually like experience what it's like? Like, put yourself, like, have conversations. If you can't, like, hear from your buyers, like what their concerns are. And then it's like, what can I create that creates transparency around how my thing is different? And how can I set clear expectations around that? Another one is introducing a front end offer. And this allows people to just experience the magic of working with you. And that makes like your higher ticket offer just a much easier yes. Or you could offer things like shorter trial periods of your main offer. One of the things we've even considered doing with the accelerator, because right now it's like you have to commit to a year, unless there's like a secret downsell where like you can get downsold into like a 6 month, but like to the public, it's like a year-long commitment unless you get into the trap doors of all of our funnels, right? But we've even considered, like, just as a test, as a hypothesis, what if I open it up where just for a single, I don't know, maybe like a 2-week period or something, where someone could join and start with just 1 month, and then they could decide if they wanted to keep going like for the year after that 1 month, right? So like that's even something I've considered with that offer. Okay. And for scaled businesses, listen, ruthlessly cutting out bloat from your overhead. I've been on a fucking tear in my business. My husband last week was like, damn, you are cleaning house. And this might mean for you, like, installing operational efficiency. This might mean if you notice your team is billing a ton of hours and it feels like a black box, like, you need to know, like, what am I paying for? And is it because my back end is messy? Are there messy workflows? Is my back end disorganized? Have I not trained my people properly, right? Like, what are the things that might be creating bloat in some of your overhead? This might take like taking a fine tooth comb, like running through your team and identifying like who's getting paid a lot for high wages for low level tasks. Or this might be looking at like, I'm putting my team on a bunch of this stuff that we can just cut. We shouldn't even be doing this right now. Like, it's not a priority based on where we are in the business. In the past 6 months, I've reduced my overhead in my business by literally 50% through this process. I'm literally recording a course called Back End Bliss. That's like walking through exactly step by step how I did this. Because for like, for like my scaled businesses, usually it's like, we've just been in a market cycle where it's like more sales, that's the lever. And this year for a lot of scaled businesses, it's like, man, like if I can cut 50 grand from my overhead and still get the same amount of work done, just like cut out the bloat, like the bullshit, that's great, right? And so that might be, if you're in a scaled business, something to look at right now. All right, a couple Kathryn Morrison coaching examples. We've run the Brand Alchemy Accelerator for like years. And this year, for the first time, we have introduced a lower end offer that's then moving people into like a secret offer that like gives them, I think it's like $50 off per month to join that way. And we've noticed like, oh, this is nice, right? Like we're getting a sale on the front end and then people are popping in on the back end and joining through that. And that's giving them like a taste ahead of time of the work, right? And we ran the program for years and never did that before. We just didn't have to. Pro tip for higher end brands, because I've talked a bunch about front end offers. You do not want a low ticket offer for low ticket buyers. You want a doorway offer for sophisticated buyers that allows them to move to your high ticket offer, which is a larger decision. That's just like a little aside, but I'm kind of just looking at where might people like go in the wrong direction after this training. That was one of the places. Another thing that has been really fun for us is setting up a business where we just have sales popping in every day. I like, and it's so funny. My husband was talking to me about this the other day. Like, as I guess in the past year, like launches got more consistent. He was like, if it's inconsistent, like, why do you launch? And I still love launching. I actually do love launching, but for a while it was just very reliably, like we just have a couple launches a year. It's a huge cash injection and then we're like done. It reminds me, I have some friends who are real estate investors and they like make nothing for most of the year. And then they make like $3 million and like in like one fell swoop. Right. And I think for a long time, that was kind of like a texture of a lot of businesses. But for a lot of people launching, they've just noticed it's not as consistent, as reliable as it has been in the past. And so even though it does provide cash injections, that there's like a desire to have more. How can I create this open everyday energy where like sales are just always popping in? And like, this is literally, I just pulled it from our Kajabi from like just the last week, right? Like this is just the last week of sales in my business. And it was kind of fun. I think it was like, was it Monday? I think we had like a $1,500 3-minute period, right? It was kind of fun to earn $1,500 in 3 minutes. So it's nice to create things where you can have that sort of like energetic vortex of sales always coming in. Okay. As coaches, we tend to focus on identifying what needs to shift within us, patterns, limiting beliefs, all of that that's standing between us and sales. I deeply believe in that. Like, listen, I came from the world of business development and like everything I covered today. And like, I did a lot of personal work. I believe deeply in that work. But what I also see as someone who's been in the business industry in lots of other markets through lots of other economic cycles is it's also equally important, if not more important, when the rapid pace of change is like this, when you've got the CEO of OpenAI saying, we've never seen this amount of technological revolutions happening at one time, and you're a digital business, we've got to be looking at the marketplace, deeply seeking to understand how your buyer psychology has shifted, how commerce has shifted, and then knowing what tools to pull out, like what tools, what shifts do you have in your brand kit? Like what's available to you within what you're doing with your brand? What's available to you within what you're doing with your offers and your offer suite? What's available to you in what you're doing in your messaging to shift, to pull yourself back into the wind of sales? Sales are still happening. You just need to shift yourself into the wind of them. So here's the good news. An investor's greatest ally is bad news. I love this. Like, listen, we started, it was like 2 years ago. We just started like pulling money from some of our like selling off some of our real estate. And I'm getting ready. It's so funny. Some people are like feeling really fearful. So they're like holding on to all their money. And I'm just like, I cannot wait to like buy all the real estate. Like when others demonstrate greed, manifest fear. And when you start to notice people hoarding all their nuts before winter, as an investor, as a business owner, just like, listen, I don't know if I like the word greed, but I'm like, I'm about to make a lot of money and add it to my net worth in the next handful of years because like, I'm not scared. I understand market cycles and I know how to shift myself to navigate through them. Like literally, I'm like going to stop paying myself probably so I can like throw a lot of money and grow my audience. Because I can see like there's just certain things where it's like someone was saying like lead costs have gone down like so much. Like there's sort of been this like thinning of the herd. And I'm like, yes, mama's ready. Like let mama scoop it up because if I can invest more in my business right now, we come out of this like it's going to be nice, right? And so when you have an investor mindset, when you have like a high level of business acumen, bad news is good news. It provides opportunities to get really good deals on your future. So I wanted to end this. We're going to have questions in a minute. If you're feeling complete, you're welcome to jump off, but there are some limited edition offers. And I will actually walk you through some of the changes I've made. And like, because we just went through this, it might feel really fun to hear me sell some of these things, and you'll see why I'm doing it, right? If this has been really interesting for you and you're like, shit, like I've just been focusing on my beliefs and like maybe I want to learn about like actually business in the marketplace. I saw this coming like last year. And I had a whole mini mind. It was called The Marketplace. And we talked about economic cycles, what you need to do with your offers, your messaging, shifting algorithms, like all the marketing platform changes, AI, like all of the marketplace factors that impact your business. There's like, it's 8 modules. It's a deep dive. Like there were people that came in, they were like doctors that had started coaching businesses. And they were like, I feel like I went through this and I actually learned something and I'm like smarter as a business owner. So if like you listen to this today and you're like, I would love to learn more about this kind of stuff, you're welcome to email support@KathrynMorrisonCoaching.com and they can get you set up with the marketplace. It's $1,997. And it is basically like, this is sort of like a taster, like it sort of like opens into the Chronicle of Narnia's of like deep dives into everything that we covered today. You will feel so like solid as a business owner to navigate whatever comes at you. It's a really exquisite program. And then there's some limited time offers around this. And honestly, you'll see all of them are tying in the marketplace because it's very relevant to what's happening right now. So I am putting on offer for those of you, and this is probably most relevant for people in like scaled businesses where you've heard this and you're like, shit, like Kathryn just put her like, little finger on the nose of like everything that's happening in my business. And I'd like to make some of these shifts and I would love her eyes on my business while I do it. I'm offering 1 month of Voxer coaching and access to the marketplace for the month while we work together for $10,000. And so that would be Monday through Friday. It can include mentorship, personalized guidance, mindset coaching for like some of the more emotional stuff. Like, listen, there's people that are like, their businesses are running into the ground because they're like unwilling to make hard decisions around like their bloated team right now, right? And I'm like, you will literally kill your business because of your feelings. Like this is, if there's something where you feel like there's hard decisions to make and you'd like support in making them, I got you. Business consulting, any of the stuff that we cover today, where it's not really the internal emotional part of it, but it's like really the structures and the strategies. I got you. I'll be in your pocket. And then I will review if there's anything that comes up in our month together and you're like, I'm going to go create this. It will also include, I'll be happy to look at any sales page copy that you write, any new offer docs that you create, and you want to riff on creating new offers during our time together. And then you'll also have access to that marketplace during our month together. So if you're interested in that, you can email support@KathrynMorrisonCoaching.com and they can get you the link to purchase that. And I would love to support you. Okay. Then for right now, for the next week, if you have been considering joining the Brand Alchemy Accelerator and everything we just covered around the marketplace, you're like, I think I would like to learn more about that. I am offering for the next week, if you join your annual membership before what is it? The next July 25th, is that the date, right? If you join before then, we will actually just grant you the marketplace for free during your entire duration of your Brand Alchemy membership. And so if that was something when the offer came about the marketplace and you're like, ooh, should I do that? But you were also thinking about doing Brand Alchemy, this is a really nice way to scoop up and if you're like, shoot, I've got to like get some differentiation in my brand, this would be like a really nice offer for you. Okay, if you are someone that as we went through this, you looked at it and you're like, actually, like I can see it's like more my offers and my messaging that need work. We are not, I think we're going to launch Words or Wands. Our next round will start in November and we're going to launch it, I think, in October. But for those of you that want to apply right now, if you're accepted, right? Like if you apply and you're accepted upon making your first payment, I will grant you immediate access to the portal. So if you know you have work to do in your messaging, like you can get started now. as well as immediate access. If you've been close to me, you know, I put out like, I sold an offers mini mind for people that like, they knew that there was some work they had to do around their offers. And then I like when I thought I was going to do like a training for the mini mind, I developed an entire course. It's a fucking masterpiece. I actually think, like, spoiler, I think this next round of Words or Wands is the last one I'm going to run with the current structure, and I'm going to restructure it after that to always include the offers course. But for right now, it's going to be a separate thing, but you can, if you join within the next week, I will extend that to you. You can get the offers course and the messaging course. So if you have offers or messaging work, that might be a really beautiful option for you, as well as the marketplace. And here's the thing, because I know that like for people, this is for people who are like earlier on in their business, and there might be a little bit of like concern or a squeeze right now. This is the reason why I'm offering. I've never offered a payment plan before. But you enrolling right now actually gives you the ability, if you make that $5,000 initial investment, then it's like 9 monthly payments of $575. So that is like a really nice way for you to get started and get some really nice wins, which if you listen to the earlier part, you can literally see me walking my talk in the limited edition offers and some of the changes I'm making. And also, pay in full. If you're more of a pay in full gal, right? If you're one of those people where you're like, I'm doing okay with my finances and I'm ready to go. If you pay in full and you apply and you're accepted and you make that payment, you will get a private messaging audit with me. So that could be something, whether it's you want me to look at a sales page, you want me to watch you sell in a webinar, like whatever the thing is, you can get that private experience with me before we kick off in November. And just all of these lovely mock-ups of all of the programs that you'll get by joining Words Are Wands right now. And if you're in a scaled business and you heard some of the things that I was saying around scaling and you're like, oh crap, this is like, I was literally like mad on a call with my mentor today. I'm just like, I'm so tired of people. Like, there's so many people that make 7 figures and they aren't millionaires. Like, and I like really, it like just hit me recently where I was like, I was a millionaire by my early 30s, like multi-millionaire by my mid 30s. And I'm just like, my net worth's just like compounding. And I know how to actually run a fucking business. Like, it's the difference. Like, I think there's some people that are really good at marketing. And then it's like hard because you have to learn how to actually, if you're good at marketing, then you sell a lot and then you have scale and then you actually have to learn how to run the business, right? And so if that's something for you where you're like, man, like hiring and having a lean team and operations and like all of that stuff feels a little bit like a black box to you, I've got you. Pleasure and Precision. I think we're going to launch at the end of August, but if you apply now, you will get immediate access. You'll actually get it before anybody else. For anyone joining Pleasure and Precision in the next round, I'm filming it right now. I think I'm actually going to finish it up today. Like literally everything on systems and how to set up scalable systems on the back end, people, how to hire correctly, how to train correctly, how to identify if someone is a low performer, if it's your fault as a business, or if it's actually like that you hired the wrong person, like all of that. It's a mind-blowing course. You're going to love it. And so if you're in a scaled business and this is more your vibe, you can apply to join Pleasure and Precision. And this is like, you get access to everything right away. And I'm going to finish up Backend Bliss like today. So you will have it as early as next week and you can start working on it if you apply and you're accepted. And then also for the first time, I'm offering an extended payment plan for that too. So we do, that starts with a 3-day immersion experience. And so we're going to do that, I guess, in November. We'll do it. I don't know. We might do it in Austin. We might do it in Sedona. We'll see. And so to get started, it would be a $10,000 initial investment. And then you can have access to all of the digital side of things. And then we will kick off together in person at our immersion experience in November. And so it would be that $10,000 to start and then 9 monthly payments of $1,777. And pay in full bonus. Private month of Voxer support to be used prior to our immersion experience in November. And if you're someone that you're like debating between this or the private month of Voxer, I'm totally fine. If you want to buy the month of Voxer with me, and then you're like, holy shit, you're my person, I need to keep working with you. You could totally just apply that, right? Like that as a credit and join us in Pleasure and Precision as well. Okay. So This is the whole pantheon. Is that the word I would use? Right. So like when you join Pleasure and Precision, you get access to literally everything I've ever created. And so if you're wanting to like really do some work right now, I got you. So if for any of those, just email us support@KathrynMorrisonCoaching.com, or you can message us on Instagram and my team will get you the information about that. And obviously, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Now, I am here. I am still available. So if you have any questions, and I'm sorry, I've been talking for so long that I have not even looked at the chat. So I'm going to look at the chat right now, and then feel free if you want to answer. Oh, wait, can I stop my screen share? Here we go. I want to see your faces. Okay, now I can see the comments, and you can start dropping questions in the chat if you have them. I'm spending more on groceries, not because my behavior has changed, but because the price of produce has gone up. I'm also being more discerning with buying coaching programs and courses because I'm more aware of what I need and want. Oh my God, what I love, holy shit. I wish I had seen this message like earlier. She wrote that at 2:07. That was before I covered market sophistication, right? So like in real time, like you seeing like, oh, I'm becoming more discerning with buying coaching programs and courses because I'm more aware of what I want. She literally was saying like, I've become a more sophisticated buyer before I even covered that part in the program. Okay. This is wild and hilarious to think it's all happened in 5 years. Is TikTok focused on monetization? Okay, so I can answer that question. So this is something, I actually covered this in the marketplace last year. TikTok is, it's funny because things happen and they sort of merge and start to go faster, right? So I think Instagram was around for, I don't know, was it like 15 years before it moved from growth to monetization? But TikTok came out and a lot of people went onto that platform very quickly. But I think it was early last year, they started making big changes to their commission structure if you like sold products on TikTok. So whereas it took like Instagram 15 years, and obviously there's a whole gray zone. It doesn't mean you go from like growth and then you flip a switch and you're totally into monetization. But even last year, I remember covering this when I ran the marketplace, which was actually, oh my God, I think I just covered the marketplace at the beginning of this year. Is that right? This is what time is like. I'm like, what is time? But within like the last 6 to 12 months, TikTok has kind of cranked up its monetization channel, and people who are on there are even noticing like the reach that used to be like, oh my gosh, like I don't have to do anything and it just sends me out to millions of people, like some shifts there as well, right? And with any marketing platform, you just have to like, nothing is ever free. Right? Like just think about like if you're getting free something, right? Like for Instagram or TikTok or whatever, like they're getting something out of pushing you out to people, which is that they want content on the platform. When a new platform comes out, they really want lots of accounts on there creating really good content. Because if you never worked in tech, like the way that like people get funding, like VC firms are looking at like how many users do you have? And how sticky is your app? How much time are people spending in it? And how often are they coming back? Right. So like they're incentivized to want people to really be there. Right. And this is why you notice if you like put links or stuff in your Instagram, your like stories will decrease. They don't want people venturing off of the platform. Right. So when you understand the goals of the marketing platform, and if your goals and the marketing platform goals are aligned for a while, right? Like for Instagram or TikTok, where they're like, we want to grow. And if you're a creator, like just put your stuff here and we'll like send you out to people. And we're like, yes, we will create and get like free exposure. And then as their goal changes and they're moving more towards monetization and you're not willing to pay to play, like that's when there's misalignment between your goal and their goal, right? Okay. That graph was crazy to see. Is this the same level bubbles 2008? I actually don't remember what I was showing at that point. Probably the housing graph. I don't think it is. This was my point of like with the housing market, like all markets were different. And that's why I showed Las Vegas versus Austin. I think every part of the coaching industry is different. And some are seeing huge things and others are barely even noticing. Like I literally have friends who have coaching businesses that they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Right. And so it's like, it's the same thing. Like coaching industry, what? Housing industry, housing market, where, right? And so it's the nuance of it, right? Thanks so much, Kathryn. This is super informative. I'm in the UK. Need to hop off, wind down for bed. Thank you for coming, Abby. Is there a summary page for all of today's offers? Yes. So listen. I am a manifestor and a surge right now. I'm like doing a whole course. So I sent a task to my VA right now to create not a page, but it will be sent out in an email. Maybe we should make a page. Do you guys want to pay? Like, I always have to balance that, like my ideas, constant ideas, with I never want to overload my team. But at the very least, they will be sending out an email that bullets through all of these offers. Okay. Question: how to assess how your people are being affected, the widespread versus mild, acute, et cetera. This was so rich. Thank you. I think there's like certain things where you can always run surveys, right? Like you could like really consider what we went through today and be like, okay, what would I have to, what are questions that might reveal to me, like what's happening with my people? Just get your finger on the pulse, just talk to them, send out a quick, like eight question survey. And maybe if you want to have a lot of responses, is there some small digital asset you could give away to like incentivize them to fill it out? But I also just think we oftentimes, when we put on our business strategist hat like this, we see a lot more than we think we are capable of. I think some of this is like me just being trained from working in business development and business, like in like companies for so long. But it's not hard to see, right? Like trust that you know your market. And if you're in a more scaled business, it could also just be like asking people to reply to different emails. Like, what are you curious to know about them? And what's going on for them? And so like start to notice, like it could be the kind of thing where if you literally notice, like some of your people talk about how like chicken has tripled in prices, like it's just interesting because like for me, I am a high net worth individual. I'm sure it's true that groceries have gotten a lot more expensive, but there's so much money I don't even notice, right? Whereas if you are hearing your people say stuff like chicken's tripled in price, that shows that like they're more impacted, they're more price sensitive, they're more aware of where their money's going, and that's going to cause this kind of thing. And so I do think there's like once you open yourself up to these frames and just allow yourself to get curious, you're going to start to, your customer will say something to you and you'll be like, oh, I remember Kathryn said that thing. Like, this is like an interesting cue. Like, I wonder if this is a theme. And then maybe like next week, someone else is going to say something else and it sounds similar to that thing, right? And you're gonna be like, like before this training, like I wouldn't have realized the root cause thing, but I'm starting to see some of this happening. And what can I do in my business to solve for it, right? And so that's like, I think that's like what I would like, trust your gut, like, and then also just listen. I do think this is something for scaled businesses that really got knocked on their asses is they weren't listening to customers. I was like even talking to a friend who's like in a multiple 7-figure business. And she was like, she had like listened to one of my podcasts where I talked about how like we survey every single year, which is like, I just ran businesses and like business units for so long. Like you always talk to your customers so you can like know what's happening with them. Right. And she was like, I'm scared. Like I would be scared to send out a survey to my audience. And that's like something to look at. Right. I just think, yeah, it's interesting because I feel like especially in coaching, I feel like there's this focus on marketing and getting really good at marketing, but there's so much more than just marketing to running a business. And it's like listening to your customers and understanding what's happening for them and understanding like where there's tweaks you can make in an offer, where there's different things you can do to like really connect with your people, right? So that is, okay, I think that's it for questions. So I am going to pop off. We're going to send the replay to this. Don't worry. I know, I don't even know it's, holy shit. Have I been on for 2 hours? Whoa. We went through a lot today. Listen, I feel like we did this much in 5 years. We did this much in an hour and 15 minutes. So if you've been here for the whole time, thank you. I'm sure you're leaving this feeling like much smarter and that you know how to make moves in your business. And if you're looking at some of my programs and you know your next move and you feel like working with me would be really nourishing and supportive to make those moves, I would be more than happy to support you. So you will be getting the replay in your email. You will also, charity, don't worry, we're going to be sending out a summary. I don't know if it will be a summary page of the offers, but it will at least be an email. So love you all so much. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.